What is up, guys? Randomonium here. Today we'll be talking about the champion classes. Riot recently posted an updated list of how they're classifying champions, so we're going to revisit that topic, talk about the changes that have been made, and then at the end of the video I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of like my schedule as far as when I'm going to put out videos, because I feel like I haven't been putting out as many videos as you guys would have liked. So the way this is going to work is we're going to talk about every single subclass. I'm going to put the champions that have changed some classes in either green or red. If it's in green, that means that I agree with the change, and if it is red, then I'm kind of not sure about whether or not it's a good change or not. So we'll talk about all of that with every single subclass. So first up are the Vanguards. So that class has stayed mainly unchanged. We still got, Mumu, Gragas, Leona, Malphite, Nautilus, Rammus, Sejuani, Sion, and Zac as Vanguards, and they also threw in Meganar in there as a Vanguard. But they added Alistar and Maokai, and I think these are both good changes because Alistar and Maokai are known for their engaged potential, and really Vanguards are defined as the offensive tanks, the tanks that are going to start team fights. And while Maokai and Alistar can be used defensively, like a Warden can, they can be used for peeling purposes, and a lot of times, like Maokai's ultimate is great for in defensive uses. It feels like they're kind of their core of who they are is more of a Vanguard than a Warden. So I do agree with these changes, moving them into the Vanguard class. For the Wardens, there haven't been any new additions. They just took away Alistar and Maokai, so your Wardens are still Braum, Galio, Nunu, Poppy, Shen, and Tahm Kench. And I do agree with all of these champions being Wardens. Wardens are the defensive tanks. These are the tanks that are very good at peeling. These are the tanks that are good at using crowd control and their tankiness to keep their allies alive rather than necessarily starting a fight. That's not to say that they can't start fights, because all of these champions are capable of starting fights. But usually kind of the distinction I make between the Vanguards and the Wardens is Wardens usually need to burn Flash in order to start a fight. Like, Shen can start a fight with a taunt Flash. Or, Braum can start a fight with using his W into a flash into his ultimate or something like that. But it's very hard for these champions to start fights without using their flash. A lot of times they're much better used for counter engage, where an enemy team engages onto you, the Warden is able to stop the engage with his abilities, and then you can counter engage onto the enemy team. Alright, moving on to the fighter classes. The first one up are the Juggernauts. No new Juggernauts have been added. They have hinted that Urgot is going to be a ranged Juggernaut when he has his rework, but they're still classifying Urgot as a unique champion, so there haven't been any changes really to the Juggernaut class. And really what defines the Juggernaut class is that they are basically the raid bosses, right? They have very high damage, they have very high tankiness, but they have low mobility. So, they're very easy to be kited, and Juggernauts really perform well when an enemy team is engaging onto them. So Juggernauts are phenomenal against a team that's got, assassins and divers and vanguards, but they struggle against teams that can poke them and retreat and kind of, basically kite them out. Juggernauts also excel in basically split pushing situations where they can basically have the enemy team come to them. But yeah, they struggle in times when, they're getting kited, essentially. So that's kind of how Juggernauts operate. They're kind of the more, I don't want to call it defensive, but they need somebody to be engaging onto them. They're not good at starting fights, they're good at finishing fights. Divers are the more offensive version of fighters. These are the guys who are able to engage very well into fights and to start fights. And really how I define the divers, they really are a jack of all trades. They've got decent damage, decent tankiness, decent crowd control, and decent mobility. But they aren't amazing at any of them. They don't have the same damage as an assassin or a skirmisher. They don't have the same tankiness as a juggernaut or one of the other tank classes. They don't have the same CC as a lot of other champions. And they don't have the same mobility as some champions. But they're good at everything. They're just not great at anything. So you can see that they've made quite a few changes with the diver class, and I definitely have to take some exception to these. So the first one is Kled. They've added Kled to the divers class, and this was kind of a borderline fence case. between Kled being a diver or a skirmisher. I feel like he is more of a skirmisher because one of the big things about a diver is that they can target a high priority target. Kled doesn't really have the ability to do that. He kind of is target agnostic. He basically just goes on to the person that he's closest to, and regardless of who that target is, he can usually kill them. He has very high damage even against tanks, and that feels more like a skirmisher to me. And then combine that with his remount mechanic, which gives him some very high tankiness and gives him some very strong conditional defenses, even if he builds full damage. That feels a lot more like a skirmisher to me. So I still am kind of on the fence about it, but I still feel like Kled is more of a skirmisher than a diver. But he is kind of a hybrid champion who kind of is in between diver and skirmisher. He's not a full skirmisher and he's not a full diver. But it looks like they're going to move him to the diver class, so that's how it's going to be, though I do have a little bit of an issue with that change. Next one they moved was Olaf. They moved him from the Juggernaut class to the diver class. This is another one that I'm a little bit confused about, because one of the big things about divers is that they have hard CC a lot of times. Olaf doesn't have any hard CC. His engage is good with his Ragnarok, but he's really reliant upon summoner spells like Ghost. He's really reliant upon items like his boots or Righteous Glory or things like that in order to engage the fight. He doesn't feel like a real diver. He feels more like a Juggernaut, right? He's this raid boss that you've got to take down. Like a fed Olaf is incredibly scary. Very similar to how a fed, Darius or a fed Alawi is very scary. So I do feel like that Olaf is more of a Juggernaut. I would say that he's probably one of the most mobile Juggernauts available, but I do feel like he is better suited in the Juggernaut class than the Diver class. Rek'Sai, they did the little rework on Rek'Sai, and I definitely feel like Rek'Sai is a diver now, not a vanguard, so I do completely agree with that change. It feels like Rek'Sai is kind of, one of these bruiser champions that's really great for engage, and really can target, go after specific targets, which is what a diver is very good for. Another one that's very weird is Rengar. They moved Rengar from assassin to diver, and I can kind of understand this because Rengar does not have a traditional escape like many assassins do. If you look at a lot of assassins, they have a way to get out of the fight, and the only way that Rengar can get out of the fight is using his cleanse on his empowered W. So I can understand that because a lot of divers, they don't have any way to get out of the fight. So in that sense, Rengar does fit very well with divers. But when people think Rengar, they think assassin. Like, that's one of the things that people associate with him. So it's very hard for Riot to come in and say, no, he's a diver now. So yeah, I'm a bit confused about this. I'm wondering if this is hinting at how they're going to buff or nerf him in the future. If they truly feel like he should be a diver now, based on his kit, that's going to be very interesting to see how they change him in the future, because that means probably less damage for him and more tankiness, more ability to sustain in fights. So a very weird change, and I think that this kind of shows that Riot is going to try and tweak Rengar to be more of a diver rather than an assassin. And then the final one that they changed was Skarner. And Skarner is kind of a weird one. They've kind of put him in Juggernaut class, they put him in Vanguard class, now he's in Diver. I feel like Diver can be a pretty good home for Skarner, because Skarner traditionally likes to build Trinity Force, and then he likes to build tanky items, which fits very well with a lot of the build path of other divers. Skarner doesn't have the real strong engage like a lot of other divers do, but he makes up for that by having some of the best hard CC in the game in the form of his ultimate. So I do feel like that the diver is probably the best class for Skarner, but Skarner is kind of these weird champions that is kind of, there's no champion like Skarner. And I don't feel like that Riot has a very clear idea of what they want to do with him either. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he changes in the future. But I do feel like the diver is probably the best place to put him for at least the near future. And then you can see that the rest of the champions, haven't really changed that much. They moved Evelyn into the assassin class, and they also moved Nocturne into the assassin class. So we'll talk about that with the assassins. But the rest of the divers, I feel, are pretty spot on. You know, there's not much to say about, you know, Aatrox, Camille, Diana, Elise, Hecarim, Irelia, Jarvan, Lee Sin, Pantheon, Renekton, Vi, Warwick, Wukong, and Xin Zhao. So Diver is one of the biggest classes in the game now. So I'm kind of interested to see if they're going to find a way to either make this, split up this class more, or if they're just going to keep it being as large as it is. Okay, let's talk about the assassins. So they've got 3 new additions to the assassin class. They've moved Echo from skirmisher to assassin, and this is one that I kind of disagree with, because I do feel that Echo's W and his ultimate put him more in the skirmisher class, right? They give, because how I really define skirmishers is those conditional defenses that they have, and Echo's got amazing conditional defenses in the form of his W, you know, getting that stun and getting that shield, and then also his ultimate being able to get a lot of that healing. So even though Echo has been shifted more back to being an assassin as far as his burst pattern is concerned, I still feel like he is better suited to being a skirmisher, just being a more bursty you know, assassin kind of skirmisher, rather than calling him an outright assassin. So I do feel like the Echo belongs in the skirmisher class, not the assassin class, but it looks like Riot disagrees with me. Next up is Evelyn, and it looks like they're going to turn her from diver to assassin, which I agree with, especially with the rework that's coming out with her. It looks like they're going to try to make her a full-fledged assassin, so it's going to be interesting to see what changes to the kit they have for her. And then the final one that's kind of weird is Nocturne. So they made Nocturne, instead of a diver, they made him an assassin, which is very strange because Nocturne does not have an escape like traditional assassins do. He is all engaged, which is why I feel like Nocturne is a diver. He's not an assassin. Even though people have been building him, you know, full damage a lot of times and building him like an assassin, he feels more like a diver to me. So that kind of hints to me that, you know, if they are going to make him an assassin, that he needs to have a gameplay update like a lot of other champions have been having recently, that they need to change something to give him a way to get out of a fight once he assassinates a target, because that's kind of a crucial aspect of assassins, is they have the ability to get out once they assassinate that key target, so they don't just trade one for one all the time. And then your assassins that are staying in the assassin class, Akali, Fizz, Kassadin, Katarina, Kha'Zix, Shaco, Talon, and Zed. Obviously, I agree with all of these. They're definitely all assassins. Alright, Skirmishers. So Skirmishers now have become a much smaller class. There's only Fiora, Jax, Master Yi, Riven, Tryndamere, and Yasuo. As I said earlier, Kled and Echo are no longer part of the Skirmisher class. Obviously, these 6 are definitely all Skirmishers. So yeah, not much to say here. Besides that, skirmishers, how I define them, are high damage, high mobility champions that have conditional defenses. And skirmishers are typically extremely good in dueling situations, but they are usually really bad in team fighting because their conditional defenses rely on reflexes and rely on them being able to avoid CC or avoid key abilities from their opponent. So it's much easier for them to activate those abilities properly when they're in a 1v1 or a 2v2 situation vice a 5v5. Alright, Burst Mages. So a couple changes that they made to the Burst Mages. They have moved LeBlanc into Burst Mages, and I kind of disagree with this. I feel like LeBlanc is an assassin just because of her hypermobility, but what this kind of indicates to me is that they are kind of no longer defining Burst Mages as immobile. Because you've already got Ahri in the Burst Mage class, and now they're adding LeBlanc and they're adding Lissandra to Burst Mages. And all 3 of those mages are pretty mobile. So it looks like in the future, Burst Mages aren't necessarily going to be immobile, like say an Annie or a Lux. They're going to be able to have some ability to have some mobility. So that's kind of interesting. But burst mages really are, what defines them is that they rely extremely heavily on a CC ability, and then if they land that CC ability, then they follow it up with every other ability in their kit, and they can usually 100 to 0 a target with that combo. So, I mean, case in point, Annie. If Annie lands her stun, she can pretty much one-shot somebody. Same with any other champion on this list. This is why I also don't disagree with Lissandra being put in this group, because Lissandra isn't really known for being a burst mage. She's known for getting into the center of a fight, disrupting the fight, and then using her ultimate, either defensively on herself or using her ultimate offensively on a key target. So I feel like Lissandra actually belongs more in the battle mage class rather than the burst mage class. But it looks like, Riot disagrees with me on that one. And the final change we have is Orianna. They moved her from disruptor to burst mage because they're getting rid of the disruptor class. And I agree with this. I think that Orianna definitely is a burst mage. I think anybody can attest to Orianna being able to one-shot you once she gets, a couple items under her belt. So yeah, I agree that Orianna should be a burst mage. And then Ahri, Annie, Brand, Lux, Syndra, Twisted Fate, and Veigar definitely are all burst mages and all belong in that class. Battle mages. So this is an interesting one because they got rid of the disruptor class. Now we have Anivia and Talia are also in the battle mage class. I do agree with both of these changes. It seems like how they're going to try and define battle mages in the future are medium range mages who can deal a high amount of DPS to a target and typically are really good at controlling a specific area of the battlefield. So they're kind of merging the disruptor class and the battle mage class into one because disruptors were very good at controlling an area, and it looks like battle mages are also going to be defined as being able to control a certain threat zone around them. So yeah, I agree with Anivia being a battle mage since she is a little bit shorter range. She deals a lot of DPS. She also has quite a bit of burst, but her ultimate AoE DPS damage. And then Talia, very similar. Talia can deal a lot of burst damage, but she's much better suited as kind of controlling space around a target, using her Q to deal DPS damage, things like that. The one that I don't agree with is Victor. So they put Victor in with the battle mages, which is kind of weird. I feel like he does belong as a burst mage because I think anybody can tell you that Victor definitely bursts pretty hard once he gets a couple items. I think the reason why they did this is they put him in battle mage because his Q is on a really short cooldown at higher levels. His E does 2 sweeps of damage. It does the first sweep and then the second sweep of damage. His ultimate is DPS, vice a burst ability now, and he can control space with his W. So I can understand their reasoning for it, but I definitely feel like he still is more of a burst mage than a battle mage. Artillery mages didn't really have any changes. The only change was they moved Varus to Marksmen, which we'll talk about when we get to the Marksmen. So artillery mages are now kind of the smallest class in the game. So it's kind of interesting to see what they're going to do with artillery mages in the future, whether they're going to try to reclassify them and basically do what they did with disruptors with artillery mages and kind of, bring them into a different class or reclassify them, or whether they're going to just add to the artillery mage class with future champions. Because right now, it's kind of weird having a subclass with only 4 champions in it. Enchanters. So enchanters have stayed basically unchanged right now, and really how they're defining enchanters as the defensive supportive champions. So champions that rely on buffing up their allies or disengaging from the enemy team. So you can see like Janna, Karma, Lulu, Nami. All of these champions are very good at counter engage. All of these champions are very good at keeping their allies alive. Probably the one that is probably the furthest out of that would be Sona, because she can do quite a bit of damage and has pretty decent engage as well. But I do agree with all of these champions being classified as enchanters. So now we get on to the new class that they've created called the Catchers. So they got rid of Disruptors, and now they have what they call Catchers. And the way that they're defining Catchers is they're defining them as the offensive supporting champions. So the champions that start fights rather than disengage from fights. So these champions have a high amount of utility, but they also have the ability to start a fight with lots of CC. So you can see that we've got Bard, Blitzcrank, Ivern, Morgana, Rakan, Thresh, and Zyra. And I actually really like this change. This makes a lot of sense. Because if you look at a lot of the other classes, you have one side that's more offensive, one side that's more defensive, one side that's better at engage, and one side that's better at disengage or being engaged upon. So I definitely agree with this change to making... having an offensive supportive side and a defensive supportive side in the Catchers and the Enchanters. So yeah, I agree with all of these changes. I think that this could be a really good subclass and definitely better defines those supports that are really good at starting fights. Alright, Marksmen. So Marksmen had some of the biggest changes, and in that they got rid of a lot of the non-traditional marksmen. So you can see like Azir's gone, Kale's gone. A lot of these champions that relied on auto attacks but weren't like your traditional AD marksmen have now been moved into the unique class. So the only change that has happened here is Varus was moved from artillery mage to marksman, which I agree with. I think after they made those changes to him, with the way his Q works, he definitely is more of a marksman. The Blade of the Rune King, Runaan's Hurricane build, it's kind of like the standard on him now. So yeah, he's definitely a marksman now, more than an artillery mage. And then obviously all these other champions are definitely marksmen. Marksmen really are defined as range DPS champions. And you can see that the majority of these champions do physical damage, but there are a few that do magic damage, like Corki and Kog'Maw primarily deal actually magic damage. So yeah, I agree with all these changes, and I think that this is a better way to kind of... the marksman class was just really huge, and I kind of like that they're trying to constrict the marksman class and kind of better define it, rather than it just being like a catch-all for a lot of different champions. And then finally we've got the unique champions. So they said that they want to embrace unique playstyles. They don't want to force champions into boxes. And I like that. I do like that. It does make things a little bit more difficult for new players, because like they won't really necessarily know, well, if I like, one champion, does that mean that I'll like Cho'Gath, or does that mean I'll like Fiddlesticks? It's kind of hard for new champions to kind of figure out like what these champions do, or what other champions that they're similar to, because Azir has nothing in common with Cho'Gath. So, it's kind of, there are pros and cons to having a lot of champions in the unique category, but I don't mind it. So for our unique champions, we got Azir, Cho'Gath, Fiddlesticks, Gangplank, Graves, Mininar, Heimerdinger, Kale, Kennen, Nidalee, Quinn, Singed, Teemo, Urgot, and Zillion. And I actually agree with all of these. I think that all of these champions are unique enough that you would want to have them in a unique subclass, where you can say like these champions are just way out there. They're very different from everyone else that you can play. So try them out, because there's no other way to describe them other than unique. So I definitely agree with this. When I do a video on these champions, I probably will try to describe them in terms of other classes. Like I will try to describe Azir as kind of an AP marksman who also has, good CC, and talk about, Kennen as kind of a mix between a marksman and a battle mage, or Kale as a combination of a marksman and an enchanter, things like that. So that's basically how they're redistributing the subclasses. Let me know if you agree with these changes or disagree, or if you agree with my assessment or disagree with it. I think there's a lot of really weird ones, like Nocturne going to Assassins and then Rengar going over to Divers. That was definitely very weird. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are. There will be no Fantasy LCS video this week because Rift Rivals is going on this week. So I'm going to take a little bit more time with my assessment, and will put out my Fantasy LCS video before the following week. And then also, I am going to be doing a video on Fantasy LCS strategy. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll try and let you guys know how to participate in that. Really what I need is I just need you to go to your matchup tab, where you can see like your team and the enemy team, and I need you to take a screenshot of that. And I'll use that screenshot in my videos to kind of show you how I would play that specific week. So if you're interested in that, post a screenshot of your matchups tab for your upcoming week, and I'll come out with a video, hopefully, Thursday or Friday, on how I do strategy. And if I don't get anybody who submits screenshots, then I'll just do my own fantasy leagues and show you how I'm going to be playing my fantasy league that week. And then I am going to be trying to do a lot more class videos. I think I'm going to probably do Artillery Mages next, because that's just going to be a really easy one to knock out of the way. And then I have been getting a lot of requests for Burst Mages and Enchanters and also Assassins. I'm kind of hesitant on doing Assassins until Evelyn comes out, the rework, because I want to include her into the Assassin class. But yeah, I definitely think I can do Artillery Mages, Burst Mages, and Enchanters, no issues. So, yeah, I've got a lot of things that I want to do, not a lot of time to do it, so I'm probably going to have to cut back on how much I'm playing. And then the final thing that I like to do, just kind of for me to relax, and I like putting out more videos, is send me your replays, right? I've only had one person send me replays, and I had a lot of people, upvote that video and say that they like the video and they want to see more of this video. I can't make those videos unless you guys send me replays. So it's got to be from the current patch. It has to be, well, it doesn't have to be a loss, but I prefer if it's a loss, because those usually are better learning experiences, and also it's also a lot more fun if it's a loss. But it definitely has to be the current patch, otherwise I can't open the file. Send your replays, the .raffle file, to randomoniumreplays@gmail.com. I'll put a link in the video description. But yeah, you guys, I need your guys' help if you guys want that video series to continue. So, we got the Fantasy LCS videos, we've got the, guess their ELO videos, we've got the class videos, we've got a lot of video series that I want to continue, but I do need your guys' support. I do need your guys' help with some of those, and I do want to put out a strategy video this week that I'll need your guys' help with as well. So if you have any questions, leave a comment below. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys have a fantastic 4th of July. This is Randomonium signing off.